Hello, friends, and welcome to the Classical Republican. Episode 3. Today we are talking about Aristotle, the guy who started it all, or at least started writing about it seriously. So, to put it into context, you have Socrates, I'm sure you've all heard of. You have his student, Plato, who wrote down everything that Socrates said. And then you had Plato's student, Aristotle. And he disagreed with a lot of what Plato said. And from their disagreement comes the entire focus of Western philosophy. Are you a Platonist or are you Aristotelian? So, today we're going to be talking about Aristotle's politics. So, first off, Plato wrote the Republic, but he didn't call it the Republic. There's this word, politeia, and we have the meaning, which is more to do with a Greek city-state, or polis. Okay, so the polis is what the Greek philosophers had in mind when it came to a proper state, a city-state. Okay, so where does the word republic come from? So we have this idea of the mixed regime, which I went over in episode 1. And the mixed regime, as we remember, you have rule by the one, rule by the few, rule by the many. And so you have the good version and the bad version, just to recap. And then Aristotle said that the best, or the best that you can have is a mixed regime. And that would be a mix of rule by the one, rule by the few, rule by the many. So the mixed regime, sometimes translated as polity. So he was talking about the city-state and a mixed regime in the city-state as the most stable form of government. Now, that's what it meant. Even when the word was translated into other languages, in Latin, it was called Cicero came up with something called res publica, which really is something that is public, so public things, and that is the state. The state is all the public things. So the mixed regime is what Cicero was talking about too. Although Cicero was a Neoplatonist, his politics were really shaped by Aristotle. Now, the mixed regime is what was meant by this polity, or res publica, or later in English we called it the republic, all the way up into the late 1700s. And then it started to mean a representative democracy. Okay, representative democracy makes more sense in a large nation state. Okay, in the late 1700s, we have Great Britain, we have France, we have Spain, and those are the first three, Western European nation states who are kind of taking the lead, becoming imperialist, just mongering in power. And so they come up with an idea, which is they call it the republic, but it's really a representative democracy. The state is so big that we have representatives who are going to represent us from our city, from our district, from our county, what have you. And so we vote for that representative, and there's the democracy. So it's a very simplified, maybe dumbed down version of the mixed regime. that fits better or that fits well on a larger nation state rather than city state. Okay, so remember that this mixed regime is the possible best that we can have. Okay, it's not an ideal, it's what we can have. That will be really good and sustainable. Aristotle originally talked about the mixed regime and implied these checks and balances. And usually he was talking about classes, maybe rich versus poor, just groups of people, maybe guilds, different guilds, and possibly institutions. So you would have institutions like the Vuli in ancient Greece, that was like a council. You would also have an institution like the ecclesia, which was a large citizen assembly. Now, the Vuli, the council, would be smaller, possibly up to a few hundred, maybe. The ecclesia would be very large, several hundred to several thousand. And the ecclesia is where we get the word for a church, but that's because the first Christian churches were ecclesia. They were an assembly of the believers or disciples, and so that's why we have that word today. It was borrowed by the Latin-speaking world, ecclesia, into ecclesia, and then it was the people in the English-speaking world borrowed it. And so this Vuli and ecclesia pairing was kind of the standard in the polises back in the day of Aristotle. Now, usually the Vuli was peopled. If you weren't in a very strong democracy like Athens, maybe in Corinth, you would have a Vuli that was really doing all the work, all the decision making, and they were the Vuli were aristocrats. Okay, so and they didn't have an ecclesia. In Athens or in other democracies, you had a strong ecclesia. But you also had a Vuli in Athens. So in most places you would have a Vuli and ecclesia, and Aristotle saw this as somewhat of a proto mixed regime. Just needed to be developed a little bit more. And we saw this during the Peloponnesian War. So this is like a generation before Aristotle. And you had Athens and Sparta going to war. Athens would go around and prop up these democracies. So they were basically putting all the poor people in charge. Now, Sparta, which had a very complex mixed regime that Aristotle kind of idealized, but they would go around and prop up these oligarchies. Okay, they wanted a small group of people to be able to control their allies. So this is really the summation of Aristotle's politics. He talks a lot about comparative government. He really, writes the constitutions of several governments and talks. And constitution meaning not just meaning a document that spells out the rules of that society. It is what constitutes that society. All the things that constitute that society. So it has a lot to do with institutions. So in the politics, Aristotle also goes on to talk about education, and you're going to have different forms of education in different regimes. And so in his ideal regime, you're going to have it geared toward public participation, because as I went over in episode 1, the one of the main principles is to have citizen participation. So you need citizens who are knowledgeable of public administration and communication skills. So you have to be able to engage in rhetoric, and so rhetoric was kind of the capstone of classical education, and we even have that today in our model of classical education known as the trivium, which really came together at the end of the Roman Empire, but was handed down throughout the Middle Ages into the modern era, and we have the trivium today. Aristotle also talked about happiness, and his definition of happiness was the state that you are in through and you get there through virtuous actions. So virtue was very important to Aristotle, and he even wrote a few books. One of the most famous is Nicomachean Ethics. And so and the Nicomachean Ethics was supposed to be kind of a companion to the Politics. They were supposed to be read together. And of course, he also wrote about rhetoric. He wrote the first manual on rhetoric, and to become an educated person in a mixed regime, you would have to know about rhetoric, about public administration, and ethics. And through those means, it would help you to attain greater happiness, and not only individually, but as a community. Okay, so that's all I have for today. Please like and subscribe and share so more people can know about classical republicanism. Long live the Republic.